In today's video, we are going to be talking about Bitcoin halving, what it means, how it works, why does it exist, and what it means for the future price of Bitcoin. Hey everyone, my name is Jeremy, and if you want to follow along my journey as I build wealth for my family, then subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon so you don't miss a thing. And remember, none of this is intended to be financial advice. I am merely a guy sitting in front of a computer talking to a camera. But let's get into it. So this is actually the second time I filmed this video. I recorded a video maybe a month and a half ago, before Bitcoin just had this crazy breakout, and had been working on the edit and just hadn't finished it, and then obviously everything changed, and I just decided I'm going to redo this entire video. The premise of this video is really talking about Bitcoin halving and what does it mean, what is it exactly. I'm not going to get too deep into the woods of Bitcoin mining and how block rewards work and all of that, but essentially in order to verify transactions, there are people or things called miners, and essentially it's computer systems that use complex math to verify transactions. And so what happens when those transactions are verified, whatever computer in the world gets to verify that transaction first, they solve the math problem, they are rewarded with Bitcoin, called mining or mining rewards. So you can see here, Bitcoin started in 2009, was when it first started. I'm going to pop over here, and you can see what the rewards were for each block. So basically a block is a group of transactions on the blockchain. For everyone that solved one of those blocks, did the math and solved the block, in the first phase of Bitcoin, which ended on November 28th of 2012, they got 50 block rewards. And then you can see first halving happened, and then they got 25 rewards. And then the second halving happened, and they got 12.5 rewards. And then the third halving, they got 6.25. And then the last one will happen, well, here you can see April of this year. And so now the block rewards are down to 3.13 Bitcoin. How that affects the price of Bitcoin. And so if you look here, this was before the first halving. And essentially what this is tracking is the daily issuance and supply of Bitcoin. So if you think about it, there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin ever in existence. This means that each day, it was roughly anywhere between 2,000 and 16,000 Bitcoin in those first few years were being generated. And then from 2012 to 2016, when the second halving happened, you can see it was generating about 3,000 to 5,000 Bitcoin every single day. Again, it's based on the number of blocks, so number of transactions per day, so that's why it goes up and down a little bit, but it stays in that pretty standard window. And then you can see here, after the second halving, it was around 2,000 Bitcoin that were being generated each day. And then 1,000 Bitcoin being generated each day. And then it's going to drop in half. But what's interesting is that Bitcoin can only process so many transactions. You can only stuff so many transactions into a block, and you can only process so many transactions in a day. So this is not really going to fluctuate that much. But what does that do to the price? If you think about it from a supply and demand aspect, every time there's a halving, the supply of new Bitcoin being injected into the system gets cut in half. And so by default, that means that there are fewer Bitcoin for people to buy. And so what's really interesting about all of this is it was very fringe people back here that were even dealing in Bitcoin. And then it's really the same thing. I did the math based on the number of Bitcoin holders. Out of the global population of 8 billion, it's less than 2%, or excuse me, less than 3%. I think it was like 2.7% of people worldwide hold any cryptocurrency. And if you think about that, there is so much potential for Bitcoin to go up in price, especially if we think about it as like a reserve currency, a gold or precious metal or something like that. There's an immense amount of movement that can happen with Bitcoin. And so if we look at the price, let me pull up this one. You can see what has happened with the price. So this was, from when it started. And this is the Bitcoin first halving happened right here, it looks like in 2012. But what's interesting...
So that brings me to a point I want to take a second to talk about. Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in general is still very new. Like, think the internet in 1995. That is where we are right now, today. And if you want to stay up to date on what's happening with blockchain, or you want your loved ones to learn blockchain and be ready to profit from the new internet, Web3, then join my Blockchain Freedom School community. Invite your loved ones to do the same. I have courses that dive into important topics. There are weekly live Q&A sessions, and there's a community of other blockchain enthusiasts looking to grow and build wealth. I'll put the link in the description. We really are at the very early stages of blockchain, even though it doesn't feel like it. All right, let's get back to it.
And so what you typically see for each of these halvings, after the first halving, it shot up pretty quickly, right? It shot up here, and then it jumped up to here, and I don't even know. Yes, you can see the prices here. So this is $1,200 a token, and then it sort of retraced back down, and then it came back up to the second halving, which it was about $6.59. And then again, that was in July of 2016. But if you look at the new all-time highs, so 2012, November 2012, about the end of 2013, it hit a new all-time high. So about a year after that halving happened. So about a year later, you kind of hit the all-time highs. And here it was about a year and a half, right? So it happened in 2016, and about the end of 2017, about a year and a half, it hit a new all-time high. And then it retraced, and then we have the third halving. And then, again, same thing. So this time it was about, I would say, about a year and a half, and it hit, again, another all-time high. So if we expect that same process to happen, you can see over here that in 2024, this is when we had the last halving. Let me see if it's on any of these charts. It happened basically April of this year was the last halving. And so if we expect Bitcoin to do the same thing that it has done, then probably by about the end of 2025 is when we should expect to hit the next all-time high. Now, my original thought was that all-time high was probably going to be about 120,000 per Bitcoin, but we are already at 100,000 essentially. We haven't crossed over it. Today is November 22nd. So we haven't quite crossed over that 100,000. And so then the question is, okay, well, it seems like there's a lot more room to go to hit that, all-time high at the end of 2025. So could we get to 200,000 as all-time high? Could we get to 150? Time will tell, I guess. But the other thing I was thinking about, the interesting thought, and this was after watching some of Michael Saylor's videos interviews that he's done, is we haven't had really institutional money in a huge way that have come into Bitcoin. But then you've got like El Salvador, their government, one, they don't have a currency, but they're also stockpiling Bitcoin as a strategic reserve. You've got Trump, who has announced that he has interest in stockpiling Bitcoin as a strategic reserve, very much like gold. We know that the dollar is dying. We know that we are inflating the dollar by just dramatically increasing the money supply. So it would behoove us to have some sort of scarce besides dollars. We got gold, we've got silver. We need to stockpile on Bitcoin. And so what I think is going to happen is, even now, especially with this announcement from Trump, is you're going to have nation states that now say, hey, we need to buy Bitcoin. And what happens when 50, 100 nations across the world say, okay, we're going to start stockpiling Bitcoin? There's only 21 million. We've already mined about, I think it was 18 or 19 million at this point. And so we're only generating, go back to this, we're only basically generating 3 Bitcoin per block reward, which means that we're only basically generating about 500 Bitcoin a day. The U.S. has, I think, something like 200,000 Bitcoin. MicroStrategy has like 250 or 240,000 Bitcoins, something like that, with no intention of selling. So right there, that's 2% of the supply, more than 2% of the supply, just held by two entities. So the reality is, in my view, Bitcoin is going to go to 1 million easily. And if you think about the block rewards, I think it's by like 2034, it's like 99.9% of all the Bitcoin that will ever be mined will be mined. So that's 10 years from now. All of the Bitcoin essentially will have been mined. I overlooked this for a long time, and I should have been buying. In fact, I've sold Bitcoin in the past. I should have just been buying and stockpiling it, understanding it as a gold, essentially a digital gold. But that's what I'm doing now. Is I'm just little by little buying Bitcoin, stockpiling it away. I'm sure it's going to retrace, so I don't know where it'll retrace to. If we look at some of these prices, you can realize it basically retraces about 50% a lot of this time. So if it goes to 100, 120, if that's the all-time high that it gets to this cycle, it'll probably pull back to 90, somewhere in there, before the next halving, and then it'll explode up to the next one. If you haven't seen this video, go check that one out, and I will see you over there.